This Shabbat, the Shabbat that precedes the joyous Mardi Gras-like holiday of Purim, is called Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of Remembrance. It is the day when we remember the evil deeds of Amalek and read the following additional verses from our Torah scroll. The Torah proclaims, Zachor, remember what Amalek did to you on your journey when you left Egypt, how undeterred by fear of God he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when Adonai your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land that Adonai your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget, lo tishkach. It is an interesting and, to be honest, curious 3 verses. How do you, on the one hand, blot out the memory, and on the other, not forget? It is an impossibility, unless, of course, your sovereignty is assured. But the tradition sees this as a far-off dream. So it focuses instead on the need for us not to forget. It does not imagine we might be so powerful as to blot out Amalek's memory and destroy our enemies forever. So remembrance is first and foremost about memory. It is fundamental to our tradition. We remember. We always remember our loved ones when reciting the Kaddish, and on this occasion, and on this Shabbat, we recall the evil deeds of Amalek, who in the Torah's estimation was the most underhanded of our enemies. He attacked the weak. He murdered those who struggled to keep up. He took advantage of people's frailty. Why do we recall Amalek right before Purim? Why do we insist on remembering that there are evildoers who might rise up against us and seek to destroy all that we believe in? It is as if to say, do you think our victory over Haman ended this struggle? Sure, we must celebrate that Esther, with some help from her uncle Mordecai, saved us. We must rejoice that Haman's evil plans were upended. But before you dress up in costumes, before you eat hamantashen and drink way too much wine, before you exchange mishloach manot, give matanot le'evyonim, gifts to the poor, and of course hear the Megillah's story, don't forget that this did not end with Haman. Our celebration is important. Our partying, according to the tradition, is even required, because a life without what I would call obligatory joy is, number 1, not fun, and number 2, according to Judaism, not holy. But in the days before such celebrations, always remember that our victories and, of course, our parties are only temporary. This is not meant as a depressing observation. Our tradition is realistic. Never forget, we have enemies. And if one thinks otherwise, then they have not been watching or reading the news. They have not been reading history. It did not end with Amalek. It did not end with Haman. There is a straight line from these evildoers through Rome's decimation of Jerusalem and its inhabitants, to Hitler's near destruction of European Jewry, to now Putin's attack on Ukrainian democracy and his bombardment of hospitals and besiegement of its cities. Look at the refugees running for their lives. Again, there is more suffering, I fear, to come. And there will be more enemies who will rise up against all we hold dear. So what must we do? First of all, not confuse our enemies with our political rivals. As much as my political adversaries might drive me crazy, they are not my enemies. As much as my views might drive my political opponents to shout and scream at me, we are not enemies. Let us argue and debate how we might better keep our enemies at bay, how we must fight against today's tyrant and enemy of democracy, Putin's Russia. But as much as we might disagree, let us never look at each other as enemies. This is what Shabbat Zachor means. This is what lo tishkach truly means. Remember, do not forget. On these days before we let loose and celebrate with wild abandon on the holiday of Purim, we pause and remember that the fight is not yet won. And as sad as it is to say out loud, the truth is, it is never won. That's why we have this Shabbat Zachor. That is why our tradition insisted we read the Torah's words. There is always going to be an Amalek. And we can see that as clear as day in this week's headlines. Zachor, lo tishkach, do not forget, always remember. Because that is the only way we have any hope of making the Hamans and the Putins less likely to attack us. It is the only way we have any hope of blotting out the memories of our enemies. President Zelensky once said, "It's a victory when the weapons fall silent and the people speak up." Speak up. Drown out the memories of our enemies. Lo tishkach. Do not forget.